Hi, this is Mr. Evans. This video is going to look at managing strategic implementation and particularly going to be focusing on how to implement strategy effectively. Now, this is really a massive topic, how to implement strategy effectively. Organisations can have the best strategy, you can come up with a really great plan, but actually executing that strategy is often far more difficult than it is to actually come up with the strategy in the first place. So how can businesses implement a successful strategy? Well, it's worth just remembering where the strategy kind of comes in the overall big picture of the strategic planning process. So first of all, it's really important that we have a clear objective or objectives to work towards. Now, these are going to come from the organisation's mission statement and corporate objectives. And once we know what our goal is, we can start to formulate the corporate strategy, which we could define as the long-term plan for achieving an organisation's objectives. Okay, so Alistair Campbell, who worked for Tony Blair, talked about it nicely. Objective, strategy, tactics. Objectives is what you're working for, it doesn't change. Strategy is the long-term plan, it rarely changes. And tactics are the day-to-day ways that you implement your strategy. So I quite like that. He calls it OST, objective, strategy, tactics. Moving from an objective that really shouldn't change or doesn't change very often to a strategy that is a long-term plan that's fairly fixed as well, but the tactics, the day-to-day plans for achieving that aim. And in terms of this kind of wheel which sets out the strategic planning process, we start with setting our mission statement. We're then going to undertake an internal and external analysis, our SWOT and our PESTLE. Once we know where we are, it's possible to think about where we're going to go. So that's when we set our objectives. We then create the strategy, set the functional objectives, and actually implement those plans. So we're around here. And actually you can think of the A-level business course as we're moving around this wheel. Most of Unit 7, which was the first unit in the A-level business course, was based around that. And then we've looked at how to create strategy, and this is really about implementing those plans. So I quite like this little cartoon. It talks about, you can come up with the best strategy, but actually executing that strategy is quite difficult. So how can we go about successfully implementing our plan? We've set our objectives, we've conducted our analysis. How can we actually go about successfully implementing that strategy? Well, we've talked about these. We set our clear objectives. Without clear objectives, we're not going to have a good strategy. Without knowing where we are through our internal and external audit, we're not going to have a good strategy. If we don't know where we are, how can we decide how to get where we're going to go? In order to successfully implement the strategy, we need to have first consulted really with our stakeholders, our employees, our customers, our shareholders, our suppliers, to see what their vision is for the organisation, and to make sure that the strategy that we implement is going to be bought into by those key stakeholders. Once we've done that and we've set our strategy, we can break the strategy down into its component parts and set deadlines for the completion. So a good strategy will often have, several kind of bits to it. Marketing strategy, an operations strategy. Maybe the strategy is we're going to enter the Indian market, in which case we're going to have a human resource strategy, we're going to have a marketing strategy to raise awareness, we're going to have an operations strategy to build our factory. Okay, each one of those component parts should have a deadline for completion, and this is going to help us successfully implement our strategy. Maybe we need to adjust the organisational culture. Maybe we need to become aware of what it would be like to work with people from India. We need to adjust the organisational culture appropriately. We're going to look to lead by example, and I'll produce a video on culture leadership, and as well as adjusting the organisational structure in order that the culture, the leadership and the structure all enable the business to achieve its strategy. We need to clearly communicate the strategy to not only our stakeholders but to each functional area, and it should be clear how each functional area is going to help contribute to the overall strategy. If we get people on board, if people believe that they have been consulted with and then the strategy has been clearly communicated to them and it's clear what contribution they're playing towards achieving that strategy, it's likely that that strategy will be better implemented. We need to measure progress. It's important to set the dates for the component parts, and then as we're going along with our strategy, we need to set some sort of performance measures. If I were learning French, for example, I might set myself targets about how many bits of vocab that I learn, or having an in-depth conversation with someone. Equally, if we're implementing a strategy like moving to India, I want to have completed my market research by April of this year or whatever it is. Equally, let's celebrate the process. If we want to implement a successful strategy and workers are really helping us make progress towards that, let's celebrate that process that people are making, and that reinforces the path that we're on and the strategy that we're taking. Finally, we need to review and amend the strategy if necessary. If the strategy is it turns out that the strategy isn't as good as we initially thought, which is often the case, we're going to need to review, amend the strategy, and then start this process again where we're clearly communicating how the strategy will help us achieve our goals.